You feel it? Don't you? That quiet stirring in your chest, that whisper that keeps nudging you forward, even though every fiber of your being has resisted. That is the moment, the very moment an avoidant heart begins to open. Not because someone forced it, not because fear finally let go. No, it opens because the soul has recognized something far greater than comfort, the extraordinary power of connection. See, avoidance is not weakness. It is a signal, a guardian, a protective mechanism born out of experiences that once hurt deeply. But the universe is relentless. It doesn't stop calling you to your higher purpose, your higher love. And in that call, there comes a shift, a recognition that the risk of love, the risk of commitment, is the very gateway to your fulfillment. This moment is sacred. It is the first time you realize that the pain of isolation outweighs the fear of intimacy. That the walls you built to keep yourself safe were also keeping you from the divine experience of partnership, trust, and devotion. And when you finally decide to step through those walls, something remarkable happens. Power is born in vulnerability. Strength is born in courage. And freedom is born in choice. You must understand this principle. Love, real love, is never about perfection. It is about showing up. It is about leaning in when the mind screams, stay back. It is about saying, I choose you. I choose us. I choose to risk everything for something that matters infinitely more than fear. And in that moment, you are transformed. The avoidant heart, once driven by distance and hesitation, becomes a heart of presence, passion, and possibility. Your relationships begin to mirror the divine order that has always been seeking expression through you. Commitment is no longer a trap. It is your liberation. So honor this moment. Step fully into it. Release the need to run, the need to hide, the need to control. Commit, not because you must, but because your soul knows that love is the ultimate act of courage. And when you do, you will discover a power that is unstoppable, a joy that is inexhaustible, and a life that is infinitely more alive than anything your fear could ever have promised. The choice is yours. The moment is now. Step forward, be seen, be brave, and let the love you've avoided become the love that redeems your life. Fear. It's a word we often hear, but few of us truly understand its depth, especially in the context of intimacy and commitment. For an avoidant, fear isn't just a fleeting emotion. It is a constant companion, a subtle undercurrent guiding choices, reactions, and even the way the heart perceives connection. This fear is not irrational. It is deeply rooted in experience, in past disappointments, in the lessons the soul has carried from one relationship to the next. It manifests as a tension between longing and retreat, a push-pull dynamic where the desire for closeness battles with the instinct to protect oneself from potential pain. The avoidant heart is wired to protect itself, and that protection often masquerades as independence, self-sufficiency, or reluctance to be tied down. But beneath these layers lies a simple truth. Fear is not an enemy. It is a messenger. Recognizing fear is the first step toward transformation. Too often, people mistake avoidance for choice or for a lack of interest and connection. They see the distance, the hesitation, the reluctance to commit, and assume it is about disinterest or selfishness. But the avoidant heart is often yearning just as deeply as anyone else's. It simply doesn't know how to trust that desire won't be met with rejection, loss, or suffocation. Fear is the barrier, but also the guidepost. By paying attention to it, by honestly naming it, a person begins to see the patterns that have been repeating in their life. The relationships that faltered, the walls that were built, the emotional walls that prevented love from taking root. This awareness is not intellectual alone. It is visceral. It shows up in the racing heartbeat at the thought of commitment, in the impulse to pull away when intimacy deepens, in the silent reasoning that I can't afford to be vulnerable. Awareness requires courage because it forces the avoidant to confront themselves in ways they may have been avoiding for years. It asks them to stop blaming circumstances, partners, or timing, and instead to turn the lens inward. What am I afraid of? What do I truly fear losing if I allow someone to come close? The process is often uncomfortable, even painful, because it touches the core of human longing and survival instincts. Yet, it is through this fear that the door to freedom begins to appear. The moment someone recognizes their fear, not as a weakness, but as a signal, is the moment they reclaim choice. They see that fear has been dictating their life, and that true empowerment comes from responding, not reacting. They begin to understand that fear, when acknowledged, loses its power to control. By naming it, by feeling it fully, and by observing its origins and patterns, the avoidant begins to disentangle themselves from the habitual responses that have kept them isolated. The awakening is subtle at first, a small recognition that perhaps commitment is not as threatening as the mind has imagined. This is where transformation begins. Awareness allows the avoidant heart to step into conscious choice rather than automatic retreat. It allows them to differentiate between instinctive protection and the possibility of real connection. They begin to see that fear is not a signal to escape, but a compass pointing toward the areas where courage is needed most. And in that awareness, there is a sense of empowerment, a realization that the life they desire, the love they seek, is not outside of them but within their capacity to embrace. Once fear is no longer the invisible driver of their decisions, desire for true connection is a force that often emerges quietly, almost imperceptibly, until it reaches a point of undeniable clarity. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, this desire is not always obvious, even to themselves. They may have spent years valuing independence, self-reliance, and emotional distance, interpreting these traits as freedom or strength. Yet beneath the surface, there exists a persistent longing, a subtle but persistent awareness that something essential is missing from their life. This yearning is not for casual interactions or fleeting companionship. It is for a connection that resonates deeply with the soul, a connection that allows vulnerability, trust, and authenticity to flourish. It is a recognition that human beings are wired for intimacy, and that isolation, no matter how comfortable or controlled, cannot fulfill the deeper needs of the heart. The awakening of this desire often begins with subtle signs. It may appear as noticing the joy others experience in committed relationships and realizing, almost reluctantly, that this is something they too want. It may come as a quiet dissatisfaction with surface-level interactions, a sense that casual encounters or emotional distance leave a hollow space inside. The avoidant may find themselves imagining what it would feel like to truly share their life with someone who sees them fully, accepts their imperfections, and walks alongside them through the highs and lows. These moments are powerful because they pierce through the habitual defenses and illuminate the truth that connection is not a weakness. It is a fundamental an experience. This desire, however, is more than an intellectual realization. It is an emotional and spiritual awakening. It demands honesty with oneself about what is truly wanted from life and relationships. The avoidant begins to see that the comfort of detachment has been a protective illusion and that real fulfillment comes from the willingness to be known and to know another at a deep level. They recognize that love is not simply an external event that happens to them, but a co-created energy that requires presence, openness, and intentionality. In this realization, the heart begins to shift its focus from self-preservation to growth, from avoidance to embrace, from fear to curiosity. As the desire for true connection strengthens, it often challenges long-held patterns. The avoidant may experience internal conflict. The mind says, "Stay guarded," while the heart insists, "I want more than this distance." This tension is a sign of transformation. It indicates that the soul is calling for alignment with its higher purpose, which is not isolation, but communion. The recognition of this desire creates a momentum that can no longer be ignored. It inspires exploration of emotional depth, encourages courage in vulnerability, and fosters a willingness to take the risks that love inherently demands. Ultimately, the desire for true connection is a pivotal force because it transforms avoidance from a lifestyle into an opportunity. It becomes a guiding principle that reframes past behaviors not as failures, but as preparatory steps for understanding what is truly valuable. This longing awakens the avoidant to the possibility that love and partnership are not threats to freedom, but gateways to profound fulfillment, personal growth, and shared joy. It is a quiet, powerful awakening that signals the heart is ready to move beyond fear and finally step toward the intimacy it has always secretly craved. Ownership of choice is the pivotal moment where transformation begins for an avoidant heart. For years, avoidance can masquerade as circumstance, as if life happened to them, as if relationships failed due to timing, misunderstandings, or the shortcomings of others. But the truth is that avoidance is rarely accidental. It is a pattern born from accumulated experiences, fears, and learned behaviors. To step into ownership is to break free from the illusion that external forces dictate the course of one's life. It is the realization that commitment, intimacy, and authentic connection are not things that happen to someone. They are choices that one actively makes. And making this choice requires courage, clarity, and honesty that challenges every instinctive impulse to run. When an avoidant individual embraces ownership of choice, they recognize the difference between reactive behavior and intentional action. Too often, decisions about relationships are reactive, staying distant because closeness feels uncomfortable, leaving before rejection occurs, or shutting down emotions to protect oneself. Ownership means seeing those reactions for what they are, patterns that no longer serve the deeper desires of the heart. It is the understanding that true power lies not in avoiding discomfort, but in consciously choosing how to respond to it. This awareness is transformative because it shifts responsibility from external circumstances to internal agency. The avoidant sees that they are not victims of fear, past hurt, or others' expectations. They are architects of their own relational destiny. This principle also reveals the spiritual dimension of choice. Every decision to open, to trust, to commit is an act of alignment with one's higher purpose. It is the moment where fear meets courage and vulnerability becomes a deliberate act of strength. Ownership of choice is not about suppressing fear or pretending it does not exist. Rather, it is about acknowledging fear, understanding its origins, and then intentionally acting in spite of it. It is the conscious commitment to step forward even when uncertainty exists, to risk heartache because the possibility of authentic connection is infinitely more rewarding than the comfort of detachment. Practically owning one's choices transforms the entire approach to relationships. Instead of waiting for the right time, the perfect partner, or the safe moment, the avoidant begins to act from alignment with desire and values. Commitment becomes a decision, not an obligation. Presence becomes intentional, not reactive. Communication becomes courageous, not defensive. By owning their choices, the avoidant no longer allows fear, habit, or avoidance to dictate the terms of their life. They recognize that they have agency and that every moment offers an opportunity to step closer to intimacy or retreat back into isolation. The difference lies entirely in conscious selection. Ultimately, this ownership is liberating. It transforms relationships from battlegrounds of fear and avoidance into spaces of clarity, empowerment, and growth. The avoidant heart learns that commitment is not a trap, but a declaration of self-determination. Choosing to stay, to engage, to love fully becomes a declaration of personal strength, wisdom, and alignment with the soul's deeper longing. In embracing this ownership, the avoidant discovers that true freedom is not the absence of connection, but the conscious, courageous choice to open fully to the life and love they truly desire. Integration of past lessons is a subtle yet profound step on the path to true commitment for an avoidant heart. Avoidance rarely emerges in isolation. It is shaped by experiences, relationships, and the echoes of past pain. Each heartbreak, each perceived rejection, each moment of emotional exposure that was met with discomfort or loss leaves an imprint on the psyche. For years, these experiences accumulate, forming patterns of withdrawal, self-protection, and emotional distance. To integrate past lessons is to confront these imprints with clarity and compassion, not to dwell in regret or guilt, but to understand the wisdom they carry. It is the acknowledgement that every encounter, even the painful ones, has taught essential truths about boundaries, desires, fears, and the D of connection that is truly nourishing. Integration begins with reflection. The avoidant heart looks back at the history of avoidance and asks difficult questions. Where did I shut down and why? What fears guided my decisions? How did I limit my own growth by retreating from connection? This reflection is not about blaming oneself or others. It is about gaining insight. Each choice to avoid intimacy, each moment of emotional withdrawal, is examined as a teacher rather than a failure. This perspective allows the avoidant to extract meaning from experiences that may have once felt purely painful or shameful. They begin to see patterns, triggers, habitual responses, and recurring dynamics that once felt automatic but can now be consciously recognized and transformed. Beyond reflection, integration requires forgiveness of oneself and others. Many avoidants carry guilt, regret, or self-criticism for their past behavior. They may feel they have hurt those they cared for, or that they have sabotaged opportunities for love. Integration asks them to release these burdens by acknowledging that avoidance was a survival mechanism, a way to protect a vulnerable self. By forgiving past choices and recognizing them as necessary steps in their growth, the avoidant begins to reconcile with their own history. Similarly, integration often involves forgiving others who contributed to patterns of fear or mistrust, understanding that their actions too were part of the shared learning process. This process also transforms the way the avoidant approaches future connection. Past lessons become guides rather than obstacles. Patterns that once led to withdrawal now inform conscious decisions. Emotional triggers are recognized early, allowing the individual to respond rather than react. Boundaries are clearer, not as walls of isolation, but as structures that support healthy intimacy. The integration of past experiences cultivates emotional resilience, self-awareness, and a deeper capacity for empathy. Through this integration, the avoidant heart begins to bridge the gap between past avoidance and present desire. They realize that commitment is not a blind leap, but a step grounded in accumulated wisdom. Every fear, every moment of resistance, every relationship that once ended in pain becomes a resource, a teacher guiding them toward conscious, intentional love. In this way, the avoidant does not escape the past. They embrace it, learning from it, transforming it, and allowing it to inform the kind of connection they now courageously choose to pursue. The lessons of yesterday become the foundation of intimacy today. Courage and vulnerability is the final bridge between avoidance and true commitment. For an avoidant heart, vulnerability is often perceived as a threat, a surrender of control, an exposure of weaknesses, a potential invitation for hurt. Avoidance, over time, becomes a shield against the uncertainty and discomfort that intimacy can bring. But the very essence of deep, meaningful connection depends on the willingness to show oneself fully, without guarantee, without reservation. Courage and vulnerability is not the absence of fear. It is the conscious decision to act in spite of it, to lean into uncertainty with an open heart and a steady resolve. It is the moment when the avoidant recognizes that the risk of love is infinitely outweighed by the cost of isolation. This courage begins with self-awareness. The avoidant must first see the walls they have built, the defenses they have relied upon, and the patterns that have kept them emotionally distant. They must confront the impulses that have kept them from leaning in, from speaking honestly, from allowing themselves to be seen. It is not easy. It requires honesty that can feel uncomfortable, even painful. Yet this awareness is a prerequisite for vulnerability. Only when one can identify the fear can one consciously choose to move beyond it. Courage and vulnerability is therefore both an inward and outward journey. Inward, to recognize and acknowledge fear, and outward, to act in alignment with a desire for connection despite it. Acting vulnerably demands deliberate steps. It begins with small gestures, sharing a truth that has been held back, expressing a feeling that has been suppressed, asking for support, or allowing someone to witness an emotional response without retreating. These acts may feel terrifying at first because they go against years of conditioning, but each step reinforces the principle that being seen, being authentic, and being present are not signs of weakness. They are the foundation of trust and intimacy. Courage grows cumulatively. Each act of vulnerability builds resilience and deepens the capacity for connection. Equally important is the understanding that vulnerability is a conscious practice, not a one-time event. The avoidant must repeatedly choose presence over withdrawal, openness over guardedness, and honesty over concealment. They must be willing to experience discomfort, uncertainty, and even the possibility of rejection, not as failure, but as integral parts of the human experience and the path to authentic love. Courage and vulnerability transforms the dynamic from fear-driven avoidance to empowered engagement. It reframes risk not as danger, but as opportunity, the opportunity to create bonds that are real, meaningful, and sustaining. Ultimately, courage and vulnerability unlocks freedom. The avoidant discovers that the walls they relied upon for safety are no longer necessary. By allowing themselves to be fully seen and to see another fully, they enter a space of trust and intimacy that was previously inaccessible. Vulnerability becomes an act of empowerment, a declaration of self-worth, and a practice of conscious love. It signals a shift from living reactively in fear to living proactively in connection. In embracing vulnerability, the avoidant transforms hesitation into presence, distance into closeness, and fear into love. It is here, in the brave willingness to expose the heart, that true commitment finally becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Thank you for sharing your time and energy with me. Your presence has been truly inspiring. Wishing you all the best on your journey ahead. Goodbye and keep shining brightly.